Welcome back to Light the Wick. Charles, how you feeling? How you dealing with this Light the Wick situation?
I'm loving it. This is a great situation.
I think it's great too. I really do. And I'm really excited about today's episode and next week's episode, which is the second half of today's conversation. You want to set up this amazing roundtable we've got this week?
Well, as we said before, Evan Schiff is largely responsible for helping us make this miniseries happen.
Right.
We got Evan on the show to talk about Ghost Protocol, and then that helped us segue, and then Evan just jumped in and was like, oh yeah, I can help you get people, and he just sent us people, and we also asked Evan, we want you to come back on the show to talk about the editing of John Wick, and he said, well, it's very humble of him to do. He was like, well, why don't I bring on my additional editors on the project? So that's Gina Hirsch and Matt Evans. They both are credited as additional editors on the movie, and Evan has sole editing credit. Am I right? I think so.
Yeah, I mean, he has sole credit, but these two other editors are hugely important to the movie. Gina is obviously Paul Hirsch's daughter. So, we have a connection there because we've interviewed Paul a couple times. And spoiler alert, we're having him back on the show in just a little bit. So look forward to that.
It's true. We're completing the trilogy of our Paul Hirsch interviews. So yes. Paul will be back in a couple months. You'll be able to hear that. It's a really great chat that we had with him. But Gina also, she worked a little bit on Ghost Protocol, which we get into, I think, next week, not this week. But
right.
Just so you know, all you mission heads out there, all the Swanbecks who are just desperate for the mission content, next week we'll be talking a little bit about Ghost Protocol, too.
Oh, thank God you put that out there, Charles. People were worried. But yeah, I think this is a really great, full conversation of the ins and outs of all of the sort of the editorial process on the John Wick movies. And I can't wait for people to hear about it. Or hear it, not hear about it. I mean, they could be hearing about it on another episode, but they're just going to listen to it now, right?
Yeah, okay. They should listen to it now.
Yeah.
But not before you give us your favorite section of the show.
Oh, that's right.
Lay it on me.
Okay, got some plugs. This episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon, and I encourage everybody to check out his podcast, My Favorite Album, where he talks to musicians, songwriters, actors, and filmmakers about the music and how it's influenced their work. And Charles and I were on there. We've also hung out with Jeremy many times, and he is a really great dude. He always puts us to shame in a fashion sense. He's always wearing some kind of amazing outfit, so it really makes us feel bad, but we still love Jeremy so much. Would you say that's true, Charles?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. This episode is also brought to you by John B. and also Real Estate Interest LLC, commercial real estate advice for growing companies. And what they want to tell people is that companies can come and consult with them even if they're not looking to buy or sell. They help companies save and strategize too. And are they real? Are they not real, Charles? What do you think?
I think it's real. Okay. I still maintain that it's real. And, you should look up their services and use them.
Yeah. And also, when you are using their services, maybe pepper in some questions about whether or not it is a front for some kind of spy organization.
What's the John Wick version of that? Is there a front? I mean, is it like it would be some extra services at the Continental or something?
Yeah.
The Continental offers real estate services for assassins.
That would be it. So just try to figure it out. We haven't figured it out.
You got to bring those coins in. Just drop a coin. See if they take it.
Do that. Do it. Do we have anything else before we jump into this, Charles? I know it's a pretty full episode.
No, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. We'll be back afterwards. This is a very special episode of Light the Wick. This was organized by Evan Schiff, who is a madman and clearly does not have a lot of hobbies, so he decided that we should have this big roundtable sort of with all the editors that worked on John Wick. And now you guys were on 2 or just 3?
I was just on 3.
Okay, yeah. Just 3. Okay.
Yeah, I did 2 and 3, but in 3 I ran into trouble, and so then I needed help, and these guys came in to save my ass.
What trouble did you run into?
Our schedule got all screwed up. We shot New York first. And then we couldn't go to Morocco because by the time that we finished New York, it was the middle of July. And they were concerned actually not really about us, but about the dogs. And so they pushed the Morocco shoot a few months down the road, which meant that we had a ton of time to cut the 2/3 of the movie that we had. And then on the back end of the Morocco shoot, we were going to have very, very little time to cut the actual like entire movie. So when we got back from Morocco, that's when really the post schedule got very compressed. And then, even looking later on into the post schedule as we were looking towards mixing and finishing, we started having preview screenings and then another preview screening. And, as studios like to do, the more preview screenings that you have, the less time that you are given to actually like work on the final product that you're finishing. And so that also piles up on the editors, because preparing for a preview screening is sort of a separate thing than actually like finishing the movie. And it gets hard to do both at the same time when you don't have a lot of room in your post schedule.
Gina and Matt, were you guys brought on for specific sequences, or were you just assisting Evan in the sort of bulk of the movie? What was your sort of responsibility?
I would say I came in first, right before the Morocco shoot. I think I came in like 2 weeks, Evan, before they started that, because you went over to Morocco for the first week.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And it wasn't for specific sequences. It was just help, just build it. Like there was a lot of restructuring to be done, or not even restructuring, but things to try. Because once they got the Morocco shoot in, originally there was a lot more intercutting between New York and Morocco, and just between Evan trying to get the builds done on all the fight sequences and then trying to figure out different ways to piece together the film. That's kind of what I focused on while Evan was working with all the Morocco stuff. And so I did that I was with you for about 3 months. And then I had another job come up that I had to go take, and Gina took over for me.
Oh, wow.
And I was on for a shorter time. It was about like 10 weeks, I think, but it was up to the very end. And that's often when things get super intense. And, by the time I got on, it wasn't like, hey, let's play with structure. It was like, what about running time? Make it shorter, make it shorter, make it shorter. And that was basically my kind of focus, was just, it's much easier said than done. So, you try cutting things and everybody says like, you're crazy. What are you doing? You're like, all right, well, I'll try something else. You try something else, try something else, so it takes time to try all those things. And so I was, that was sort of my role, working very much with Evan.
And having another set of eyes come in very late in the process is also really useful, because if you've been on since the beginning, you have a lot of assumptions that you've never really reevaluated in some cases. So like when Matt or Gina comes in and they're like, hey, why are you guys doing this stupid thing over here? You could just cut that out and then you'd save like 30 seconds. It's like, oh yeah, we could do that. Why didn't I think about that?
Well, can you remember any specific things that you guys added or suggested that made it into the final cut and made Evan's life slightly easier?
The helicopter went away.
Oh, yes, that was hilarious. Yeah,
I don't remember whose idea that was, but the helicopter went away.
You always wanted it to go, and then it was sort of like, another thing you can do is, as the outside eye, you have a kind of like political power. You can be like, oh, well, I think it should go away, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, that's exactly right, even though Evan may have suggested it, a little earlier, but it wasn't the right timing, and he wasn't, the new person who just came, so yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to the process of editing with Chad. He's not, I don't want to say he's precious, but he loves his work and it's all great. So it is like pulling a tooth every time you lop the end of a scene or come in deeper into the head. He's like, why'd you cut that? That was my favorite line of the movie. And I'd say he had about 24 favorite lines of the movie that at one point I would cut and then, undo and put it back in. And then eventually, by the time we got to the end of the film, that they were gone.
It's funny you ask about like, oh, what went away and what were those things where Evan thought, oh yeah, we could just get rid of that. Why didn't I think of that? It's kind of hard to pinpoint because Chad loves his work and feels passionately about it, as he should. The goal is to try to find these cuts that are totally invisible, and that you really wouldn't miss once you step away. So I feel like that was, in terms of what I brought, that was mostly what I was looking for, was the stuff that was really kind of invisible.
Well, and so who was it that was it a studio demand to make the movie shorter? Was it just an overall pacing feel from a screening? And then also, what was the running time and what were you trying to get the running time to?
I can see Matt cowering in fear right now. So I think when we first previewed for an audience, it was somewhere around the 212, 213 area. And we previewed pretty well. We actually never had a bad preview on this movie. But the studio is definitely interested in getting the runtime down. There was a lot of discussion of, could you get people out to see the movie who had not seen John Wick 1 or John Wick 2 if you presented it as a much shorter, like, hey, take a chance on this, 90-minute John Wick or whatever. I mean, they never really, I guess they were looking more like 105 minutes. But, there's a lot of back and forth about, like, does running time affect turnout, and does running time affect the, like, likelihood that somebody who has explicitly chosen not to give John Wick 1 or John Wick 2 a chance before might suddenly decide, I'll give John Wick 3 a chance. Does it affect your preview score? Like, these are all things that we debated back and forth between ourselves, between the studio, and then, put to the test with previews. I think in the end, we ended up at, we did the compromise thing. We met in the middle. We ended up a little bit north of 2 hours, not including credits.
2 hours and 10 minutes, Evan.
Yeah, but that's including the
where
credits.
Were you going with the jump?
That's including 7 long minutes of credits.
It's true. It's really true.
Where were you going? I mean, if 2 hours and 10 minutes is meeting in the middle, could we have seen a 3-hour John Wick 3?
Well, I'll tell you that when
Gina is nodding adamantly yes.
I don't want to name names, but I'm sure some people in the process would have, and probably some fans would have loved a 3-hour John Wick 3.
I'll tell you the most painful critique that I got while we were cutting the movie, which came relatively early. I think it was when Matt was on. And, since we had this split schedule and the New York part was fairly polished by the time that we finished shooting Morocco, there was never really like a true assembly, one of those really, 3.5 hour, beasts, but it was like 2 hours and 40 some odd minutes when we first had the movie from start to finish without, going through and really like, excising things that didn't need to be there. But we showed that to Keanu and he loved every minute of it, as did Chad. And then, but we knew, we couldn't preview 2 hours and 40 some odd minutes. So, we had our hit list that Matt and I had our hit list that we just like went through in a matter of days and, took out scenes, took out chunks, things that we knew were never going to make the final cut. And we got it down to, I think, 2 hours and 30 minutes or something like that. And Keanu came in and watched that version and came out and he's like, well, before you had a film, and now you have a movie. And we were like, what's he going to say when we take out another half an hour?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, that was painful. I do remember after that first screening, the very first one, the 240-something that we showed him, when we went out, we were just having a drink with Chad and Keanu, and Keanu's just pacing, and he's all amped up and excited, and just was like, guys, I don't know how we get time out of this movie. I just don't know where we cut. And I was just like, oh, this is gonna be a
process.
Sisyphus pushing that boulder up the hill.
Does it dig deeper into John Wick's character? I mean, I guess I assume all the moments have more time to breathe, and we're with John. I mean, why did he love that version so much?
They like when John Wick movies are slow and thoughtful and somewhat, for me, laborious. There's like that we get made fun of all the time by our producers because Chad shoots like hours of Keanu walking places, and in the assembly all that stuff is in. So like you can spend 5 minutes watching, John Wick 2, and it's what I'm thinking of right now, but you can spend 5 minutes watching John walk from his house to Manhattan, and it's just like all these slow shots of him moseying across the street. I don't know. There's like, I think there's a feeling in those cuts that feels a little bit more old school that Keanu and Chad both respond to.
Right.
Yeah, one of the main influences was, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's one of the, these Westerns, I think, were impactful on Chad. And so, you watch those movies and they're slow, they take their time. So the kind of classic film lover in him, I think, came out wanting the moments to live long,
The funny thing about the helicopter coming out at the very end of the process is that, like, I think we had left it in there thinking like they spent all this money to get a helicopter out into the middle of the Moroccan desert. Like no one's going to let us cut it. Chad's not going to let us cut it. Like, so I think it lived in there for a while, and we were just like, it's there because of its cost and not necessarily because it's useful for the story. And then finally we took it out, and Chad was like, oh yeah, that's a good cut. Like we should have done that a long time ago. I'm like, oh, I thought you liked that. He's like, no. But then on the flip side of like our normal relationship, when we showed the next cut to the studio, one of the first notes was like, where's the helicopter?
You should, specifically, there was a helicopter that took Keanu out of the desert. So you see him leave.
Right.
So that's where it was.
I forget to add context. That's all in my head. I'm like, hey, the helicopter.
Is that after he visits the elder and cuts his finger off?
Yes.
Okay.
When he's in his new suit, they shot his double walking up to the helicopter, which from a distance you can actually still tell that it's not Keanu by the way that he walks. But we, there was a lot of effort expended to get that helicopter like out there to ferry, Keanu's double away from the scene.
Right.
Is that scene in the special features?
Honestly, I have actually no idea what's in the special features.
Wow. This is where your time to shine, Evan. All your stuff is probably in that special features that got cut, but
all that stuff is due basically at the same time that the movies do.
Okay.
So, they come in there, they ask for deleted scenes and they tape interviews and things like that. But you actually usually, one of the assistant editors is sort of organizing that because there's just so much finishing to do.
Right. Well, Matt and Gina, were you fans of the franchise before you signed on for this one? Or were you just a student loan payment was due and you said, all right, I'll jump on here?
I was a big fan. I think I was lucky enough when Evan was cutting John Wick 2. I think I might have been the first person to watch a full cut of the movie and talk with him and Chad about it. And and I was super excited to see that second one in its full entirety, and then talk to Chad and give the note that I always give, which is I think we can get into scenes later and out of them earlier, and you just get this knowing nod, and it won't happen for a while. So when Evan called about doing John Wick 3, I was all in. It was perfect timing. I was waiting for another movie to start, and I love working with Evan, and it's fun stuff to cut.
Yeah, I think I hadn't seen the first one in the theaters when it came out. I had somehow missed it, but a director actually that I was working with specifically showed me. He was like, you got to see these action scenes and you look at this, look at what they're doing. And, just really specifically admiring just that, it's not cut to it's not an Cuisinart or anything, you are looking at you see what's happening. It's clear. And, via that, then I started, watching and admiring. And yeah, it's great. I mean, it's for a filmmaker, it's so fun to get in there and work with, I feel like there are principles that are very specific to John Wick and rules that you have to kind of go by. And I was into, I learned some of them the hard way, but I really enjoyed that. I thought it was great, and I think it's what makes the movies entertaining.
What are the rules? We got to hear these rules.
Well, the big rule, the principle as I understood it, Evan can correct me, but
no, I want to hear what the rules are from your guys.
What do I think the rule? You want to try not to cut, kind of, these guys are incredible at what they do. They're just absolutely magnificent. And so you don't want to hide anything. You're not trying to pull a smoke and mirrors act. You just want to show the action as it was done. And, if there are 8 guys, then you have to know that 8 guys died before he leaves the room. You can't be like, he killed 5 and then yada, 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 the other 3. You got to know how many bullets are in the gun. Somebody's keeping track. There's a spreadsheet online somewhere. That's what I'm referring to. Did I get it right, Evan?
Yeah, I think so. For me, what I learned on Wick 2 is all those rules are right. And then the one rule that you would think that we would care about that we really don't is John Wick currently armed in the scene that we are in? Because some of the like editing jujitsu we had to do to fix structure on John Wick 2 ended up having John being armed in scenes where technically he shouldn't have been, or not armed in scenes where he should have been, or he had the wrong gun. And we just ultimately decided, like, you just assume, like, as an audience member, that John Wick always has a gun on him. And so if he has one and he's not supposed to, yeah, okay, who cares? But everything else is right. It's like we are accurately tracking the number of people that he's going up against. We are bullet counting for the most part. There's a couple instances where we knowingly choose to not bullet count, but those instances are few and far between, and we always know when we're doing it. So,
I mean, how would you fix that if you didn't have the right bullet count? Would you get Joe from Legal to tape himself putting a bullet in a chamber or something? I mean, how do you fix that if you screw it up?
There's a certain amount of flexibility. Like, the guns that we use are capped. So when Keanu fires them, he is actually firing them. The slide moves. A spark comes out of the chamber instead of the muzzle. So there are a certain number of like practical gunshots that we're tied to. We do sometimes cheat it, right. If there's like too much of a lull in between, or if John, if it's a particular stunt where they actually couldn't have the capped gun, then we'll cheat it. So there's like a little bit for us editors to play around with in terms of the exact number of gunshots that we're trying to match to. And then, if we're one or two off, if it's really important, then, like in Wick 2, when Lawrence, tells Keanu, you've got 7 bullets, like that's really important that he has 7 bullets.
Right.
So, they tracked that on the day when they shot it. But yeah, in that case, if they had been off, we would have been in a little bit of trouble.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Gina, you are part of editorial royalty, I think. I think you're the first lady of editorial royalty. Do you think about things that your dad has taught you or told you, or do you go to him when you're stuck with anything? I mean, I imagine he's a pretty good resource to have.
He is. Actually, I met Evan when we were both working for my dad. We were both assistant editors on Ghost Protocol.
Oh, we'll get to that. Don't worry. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Of course, like I learned from him. I learned so much from him. The principles that he kind of lives by as an editor are my principles, but I no longer show him stuff, really. When I was learning for a while, I would kind of show him everything I did. I always wanted to know his feedback, always. And it wasn't that I always took everything, but I thought this is an incredible resource. I can't believe I'm so lucky. I can, and then he would totally rip everything to shreds. But, it was a privilege. It was a great way to learn, And then, slowly but surely we start, it's less about me like learning the technique of editing and more you start realizing like everyone would cut something a little differently. And we both had kind of agreed together it was like maybe 4 years ago or something like that. We were kind of like, this is no longer useful. I no longer should get his notes, like I'm just going to go my own way. But I still hear his voice in my head.
Right. What do you hear him saying?
Oh, there's so many catchphrases. Are you kidding? Sometimes he says things. He says these things that you're sort of like, is that true? I'm not sure. One of them is physical difficulty is boring. I later heard that he was quoting Irvin Kershner on that. That if you just see somebody being like, they're pushing some rock somewhere, you can sense if the prop isn't properly weighted and But then there are these other moments where you're sort of like, yeah, but if the stakes are high enough or if the circumstance is right, then it's not just about physical difficulty. It's about the character's need to get something done in a limited amount of time. And, so, that's just one of what else? I don't know. I mean, one of his big things that he always says is, this is endless. This is endless. This is just endless. It's like, Jesus Christ. So I sometimes wonder if that applies to a particularly draggy scene.
When we were at his house last time, he was getting Oscar screenings in the mail the entire time we were there. And so we were asking him about, the movies from that year. And we asked him about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he said, so much driving, just too much driving. So every time I watch the movie now, I think about your dad complaining about how much driving there is.
I don't know if you should say no if you don't want to tell the story, Gina, but okay. I sometimes think about on Warcraft, you had a story about sort of griping about being known as like Paul Hirsch's daughter sometimes, and then Duncan walking by.
I don't remember this.
Well, I don't want to tell the story for you, but it was something like...
tell the story, and if she doesn't want you to repeat it, then...
Yeah. But it was something like you told me that while you were in an editorial on Warcraft, you said something like I think you were like looking at IMDb or something like that, and it said like Paul Hirsch's daughter, and you're like, God, I hate like always having to have this like association with my dad, and then Duncan Jones walks by and goes, tell me about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. On my IMDb, amazing. Yeah, and I was like, we're different. Like, my dad's cool. He's real cool. But your dad...
He's not David Bowie.
David Bowie, yeah. Yeah, David
Although,
Bowie.
I don't know. I think your dad's pretty damn cool. So in my book, nice. He's just as good as David Bowie.
That's very sweet of you to
tell
say.
Him that. Yeah.
Okay.
Overall, what was the experience like for all three of you? Were you sort of happy with where you got on the movie, or were there things that you still wish you could have gone in and had more time with, or sort of looking back on it, what was that like for all of you?
For me, I got the good end of the stick because I took us up through. Was with Evan up until the second preview. And after the second, those were basically Chad's previews, his versions and what we were testing. And like he said, they both went really great. So everybody's on a good high and feeling great. And then they wanted to do more testing and like Evan was saying, various versions and some shorter versions. And that's when Gina came in for that complete firestorm.
So when you left, Matt, you said, you know what, if the test scores go down, listen, I did my job. You guys have at it.
Yeah, it's off me.
It's off you, yeah.
But for me, the end product I was thrilled with. I thought they, I completely forgot the helicopter was out. If you would have asked me right now, I would have said it was in the final product. So I think it's great that it did go out. There was nothing, that I wasn't happy with. Although every time I see the introduction of Zero at the sushi, that was like I must have done 30 different versions of that scene as they tried to figure out what story they wanted to tell for his backstory. And at the end of the day, there was no backstory. They just were bringing him on board to go hunt Wick.
Oh, really? Well, what were the alternate backstories?
There was a version where he had been put in timeout. They never specifically said what he did, but he was not excommunicado. But Evan, do you remember what the phrasing was? It was he said something along the lines of I didn't expect to see the high table so soon, and there are consequences to your actions, but we need you back for this one. So we never knew what he was in trouble for, but he still was training his students, but he was not on the active roster, and it just was a little too nonchalant,
obtuse. I think it was.
Yeah.
It was it had the same issue that. For me, I don't even remember the character's name, but in Wick 2, the guy that Gianna is talking to when Wick is sort of stalking her, in the catacombs, that guy has a whole backstory that's just sort of vague enough to make you wonder what they're talking about, but also not important enough to the actual story to be relevant. And it was sort of similar. I think, the implication with Zero, I believe, was that he had done something that was too brutal even for the high table. And they had sort of put him on probation, but it was it doesn't, brutality that's only mentioned like that is not really, it has no weight to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there's no threat to it.
Yeah. If you're trying to introduce, a bad guy as a really bad guy, in capital letters, you can't really do it by saying that thing that you did in the past, was really bad, because it's just not the same as seeing it and experiencing it.
Evan, I'm remembering now, I feel like off the air you told us a story about John Wick 2, and we never got it on the record, and I think it was about the knife fight, because we love the knife throwing while they're walking and throwing. Wasn't there some story about how it was
They're not throwing
cut
knives.
down to
I think
super
they're just
short?
shooting at each other.
Oh, sorry, yeah, not knives. I'm sorry. They're shooting each other discreetly as they're walking through. It's that amazing sequence. And there was some story about someone. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Am I just?
Yeah. So that was, we had a lot of that scene where Common and Keanu were shooting at each other from different levels of the World Trade Center subway platform. And yeah, there was a long version of it. And then we kept, as we were doing, on Wick 3, we kept trying to take time out of the movie. And that was like a good place to do it. So we kept cutting that down until it was actually pretty short. And at one point, I brought Stefan Grube in, who was one of the editors on the last Star Wars movie. And he got to that scene and he was like falling off of the couch laughing at how fun and funny it was. And when the first thing he said when the movie ended was like, go back to that scene. I want to see, do you have more of that scene? That scene is great. And I was like, yeah, I have like a lot more of that scene, but we keep cutting it down. He's like, no, put it back. And that was actually that, like Matt was saying earlier, where, you get a fresh pair of eyes coming in, or Gina was saying you have like a political power, that was definitely a case of that, where like it took one person coming in being like, are you guys crazy? Put some of this back in. And so, so we did. And, definitely it still holds up. When I remember when the movie came out and I went to the Grove to watch it with an audience for the first time, like people were just cracking up at that scene. It's like, oh, I'm glad that we put more in, like we sort of had seen it as like, how do I get Keanu from Lincoln's, our New York geography is a whole other story, but from Lincoln Center to the World Trade Center platform, quickly so that he can get on the train and have this, have the like close combat fight with Common. And so that was all, there was all this stuff in the middle of like him going up and down escalators and doing, this like silent shootout. And so the silent shootout just kind of got like glommed onto everything else that we considered sort of expendable and time wasted, when it was actually a much more valuable moment than we initially realized.
I do just want to say that I know Matt said that he had the best job.
I didn't say it's not the best job. I did not have this added stress. Yeah,
right.
I didn't have the stress part.
It was stressful, but I feel like I got lucky because I get to just, Evan is working on this thing for, decades. It feels like he's like toiling away. And then I come in, in the last 10 weeks. And, the day I come in is the day when everyone's disagreeing. Everyone has different ideas of what to do and how to do it. And, the studio's like, we need to cut this much out of the movie. And I remember Chad being like, don't touch my action. I said to Evan, I was like, do you think we can lose 30 minutes and not cut action? And Evan was like, no, it's not possible. No. But to go from this, so you're seemingly in this impossible place, like no one will, never will everyone be happy, it seems. But then somehow we got through it. We try this, we try that. The people disagree, but then they do agree. And then, by the end, it got to this end product that everyone is proud of, So I feel so fortunate that I, got to kind of sneak in and get on the train for that moment.
All right, we're back. That was it. Part 1 of our roundtable. Charles, do you have any thoughts? Anything you want to wrap it up with?
Well, I just love that there was a 2-hour, 40-minute cut of the movie that Keanu was all in for, and next week we asked them more about that cut of the movie, and they tell us that there's yet another cut of the movie that was also a long cut, which we'll probably never see as well.
Yes. I also love Paul's advice to Gina, which is that physical difficulty is boring, which I'm not sure is true, but I do like that is one of his notes.
Yeah, Paul. I love all of Paul's little sayings and things that he's got. Yeah. You got to check out his book if you haven't. It's so great.
Yes. But yeah, that was really fun. I mean, I love getting this perspective. I think you and I were even maybe a little confused about what additional editors did, whether or not they all work together, if they took certain scenes, what that process was like, and this really helped.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it's, different from movie to movie, but in this case, they had a really great rapport, all of them together, working together collaboratively to make this movie the great movie that it is.
Yeah, it's really inspiring, and it just goes to show you that it takes technicians and artists and craftspeople at the top of their game on every level of the production to make a movie as cool as John Wick 3.
I love the Duncan Jones story she told too.
Yeah. That guy. I know you're a big Mute fan, Charles.
I didn't love Mute, I'll say. I didn't love Mute. But I did really love Moon. I think Moon is fantastic.
All right. There you go.
And I liked Source Code too. Did you like Source Code?
I liked Source Code. Yeah.
Actually, didn't Paul Hirsch work on Source Code?
He worked on Source Code and he worked on Warcraft. So there you go.
There you go.
Charles, you got any shout outs on this side?
Yes, I do, actually. Yeah, we have to give a special thank you to Robbie J. Martin. Big thank you to Robbie for helping make this episode possible. And also a big thank you to our intern, Abby Smith, and to our editor and mixer, Luke Burson. So couldn't do it without them. And we also want to tell everybody out there to visit our Patreon, patreon.com/LightTheFuse. Please sign up. We did pass the 100 patrons level. We got over 100 patrons now, active right now. But we want to get to 200 now. Why not? Let's get to 200.
Listen, Patrick Willems has like thousands of patrons. So
okay, well, so we need to catch up to Patrick Willems and beat him. So get thousands of your friends to sign up for our Patreon.
Yes, please.
And hey, just try it out for a month. Spend the $5.95 a month. Just spend 1 month, listen to some of the bonus content. If you love it, you can stay on. If you don't, then okay. But just sign up and give it a shot. Just every dollar helps our show go on. And then with that in mind, also check out our TeePublic page, which is linked from our website, LightTheFusePodcast.com. In the merch section, you will see the link for the TeePublic page, which has shirts and masks and magnets and stickers. If you buy one of those things, it really supports the show. I would love to say that every dollar goes to the show, but it doesn't. Most dollars go to TeePublic, and then a few dollars go to us, but it does support the show. So please go and do that. If you love our show and you want to help us keep going, then do that to support the show. It really helps. And also check out our show notes on the website, LightTheFusePodcast.com. In the episode guide, you'll see show notes for all of our episodes. They're really amazing. It's such a great companion to everything that we talk about on the show. It's a really great archive, and it's free. That you can take for free and enjoy every moment of it. As I know, Drew just spends every night in bed just scrolling through there and reading things and loving it.
I can't get enough. Charles. And it is a really great resource. You're right, and it's great that we've got that up now. And I also want to say that if you don't want to pay for anything, that's fine. If you could just like, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. And also just tell your friends about it. Drop us a note, keep in touch. We love hearing from you. Every little bit helps. So just raising that awareness helps us a lot.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at LightTheFusePodcast@gmail.com. The doors to any service or provider in connection with the Continental are now closed.